Hello and welcome to another edition of the Smart Wars podcast. My name is Lucas. I am your host. I want to welcome you to this podcast, and I hope that you are gaining something positive from it. It's been a long time. I haven't done a podcast in quite some time. Some things in life have changed and had to make some changes and adjustments as I've gone along, and figured that maybe that's how I need to reintroduce the show. So what crossed my mind was a quote that is known in a couple of different episodes of Star Wars. Obi-Wan, as well as Palpatine, had made mention of the same thing, that being a disturbance in the Force. Obi-Wan, of course, when he mentioned it, this was in A New Hope, when the planet of Alderaan had been completely obliterated, and he said that he felt the Great Disturbance. He said as if millions of voices had cried out at once and then were suddenly silent. And then Papa Palpatine, while he was communicating with Vader, he said he felt a great disturbance in the Force. He brought up how we have a new enemy. He mentioned about offspring, Anakin Skywalker, and of course Vader with his lovely response of, "How is that?" So, in life, we are going to experience disturbances in the Force. We're going to experience moments where everything changes. So how do we respond to it? Why is it important for us to know how to respond to those changes? Because in some cases, those changes we go through could be life-altering. And in some cases, depending on what it is you might be experiencing, it might take time for you to actively, mentally, and even emotionally adjust to that change. So if you look back into the Star Wars aspect of it with Obi-Wan and what he felt. Now, there was a goal. He got invited by Princess Leia to go to the home planet of Alderaan, meet up with her and potentially her adopted dad, and there was going to be something that needed to be discussed. But then, the Empire, they got in the way and they just put the kibosh on that thing. Completely obliterated the planet. Now, there's a lot of emotions when you're dealt with that type of loss. When you're dealing with maybe losing a loved one, there's the acceptance aspect of it, where time has to pass before you can finally accept it, because there's the void, there's the empty feeling inside, there's the difficulty accepting it immediately when it happens, because you go through a phase of denial, like, is this really happening? Is this person really gone? So we don't even know how Obi-Wan felt, except for the way he responded while Luke was in his training on the Millennium Falcon. He just it almost was like he lost his energy, he lost that motivation, that it's like the air got sucked out of him. And Luke immediately saw it and was like, is everything okay? And that's when he responded he said, I felt this great disturbance, as if, millions of voices cried out and were silenced. And when you have that loss, it's really, really difficult to adjust to it. Because you've spent all this time maybe with those people, or they've been a part of your life, or even if there's been, somebody that you're with constantly, all the time, maybe like a best friend or a family member, or even if it's somebody that you're very fond of, you're very close to, but there's been distance in time, because that happens. That really does happen when we're in life, or life goes on and people just lose touch, or just certain things change and people kind of have to move on. And part of adjusting to it and accepting that new reality is being a supportive friend to those who are in need. Or if you know that if you're going through it, if you're dealing with a loss, then it's important for you to reach out to people that will be able to provide you with what you need. You need that comfort. You need that support system in order to successfully overcome this obstacle. Because when it comes to loss, it seems insurmountable. On a personal level, I have been through that multiple times. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I dealt with one recently. My dad died in 2020. My younger sisters, Gina and Morgan, they died in 2018. In 2015, I went through a rough divorce. And Each time, feelings were different. They're never exactly the same, but the similarity is the adjusting period. The the recognition that now what was there and what was constant is now in your past, and you have to change with it. If you're constantly looking behind you, if you're constantly looking at what was, whether it was with someone you were married to, or a friendship that's gone, or something that just had to be separated for whatever reason, if it's all you're focusing on, you will never ever move past it. So you have to give yourself the freedom to be able to look at it objectively. In other words, look at the situation for what it is, what happened, and look inwardly and say, can I survive this? And I'm here to tell you from my own experience, you absolutely can survive this. I mean, even looking again, this podcast is based off of Star Wars, so you have to look at instances where people survived the loss, and you can see different examples. You can look at Obi-Wan. How did he respond? Well, he responded, based on what he could. Obi-Wan had been through quite a bit. He even lost his best friend, Anakin, so many years before. And this was now a new loss that he now had to adjust to. Well, even if you think about Anakin and what he went through with his loss, he lost his wife. And didn't even know it, but he even lost his kids. Because they had to be basically shipped off somewhere else, and they had to be given through some adoption system. No telling what kind of emotional impact went through him and his mindset and how it adjusted when all of a sudden it was brought to his attention like, hey, dude, you in the helmet, you got kids, man. There's no telling how he must have responded to that. That had to have been a huge emotional impact on his psyche and his heart condition. At that point, his heart was probably pretty black. Having been chopped up, having the edges trimmed and being basically just a half a body guy, he's just a robot, and even Obi-Wan had said he's more a machine now than man. Twisted and evil. And that's really what he became, because as he had adopted the dark side of the Force, Anakin just really became self-obsessed. It was all about him. It was all about his own power and becoming unlimited with his power, and basically doing what he wanted, with whom he wanted, however he wanted. He did not want to be controlled or stopped. And you could tell as he was growing up, as the little orphan Annie, he wasn't really comfortable coming out of his home and entering into a new life and being surrounded by all these Jedi, and kind of felt like he might have been controlled a little bit. And that's a big problem in life, is if you put yourself in a position where you're being controlled, a lot of people are going to break out of that. Because in life, you really have to understand that, we have freedom of choice. But anyway, that's a different topic. We're here talking about loss. And so Anakin must have dealt with so much emotionally, dealing with the loss of the woman that he fought so hard, he dreamed about, he had nightmares about losing her. He still lost her. All because he wanted all that power. And then years later, finding out he's got kids. So an attachment to his wife is still there, and they're alive and breathing. Now, even though the dark side is what responded most, especially in that scene, and you gotta admit, that was such a powerful scene where Vader and Luke were fighting in front of the Emperor. Luke was hiding. And Anakin was saying to him, if you can't be turned, maybe she will. Because he discovered, he was like, oh, so you have a twin sister. Obi-Wan's failure is now complete. So the dark side was still controlling him to an extent. It was controlling his mind. But his heart, although rather black and frozen and cold, it still had a bit of warmth, especially to his boy. And now he knows he's got a girl out there. Those emotions took over. And when he saw, you could see that at the very end of Return of the Jedi, and yes, we all agreed that the whole, additional no added to him, right at the end was, kind of silly, but still, that's besides the point. Here you've got Anakin seeing that his son is about to die, and He knows what that connection is. That connection is him to his daughter, and the only living connection to his now late wife. And it changed everything. He said, no more, I'm not going to deal with this. And he recognized that he had the power to make a choice. And he made that choice. And even in the other instance where that we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast with Papa Palpatine giving recognition that Luke was there. Luke was powerful. He's the one who destroyed the Death Star. It was him by himself because everybody else was wiped out in that battle. Well, not everybody else, but pretty much all the other X-Wings that were there were kind of pushed out of the way. Then, Han shows up with Chewie and the Millennium Falcon, and they get Vader out of the way, so he's able to make that shot. He made that shot, boom, got rid of the Death Star. So Papa Palpatine recognized, oh, there's somebody else here. And it showed the strength of Palpatine with this storyline because, he didn't just know who it was. As an individual, he knew who it was when it came to who Anakin is. And so that was a change. That was an adjustment that they both had to make. They both had to make. So, Palpatine had to go through the whole turmoil of saying, okay, now, all right, his son's alive, and I got to tell him. I don't know how he's going to respond. So, sometimes when life changes and circumstances have to be adjusted, and we have to make that communication. We got to have that talk that we just don't want to have. There's a method to going at it, and so Palpatine, being the Sith Lord that he was, he knew exactly how to talk to Anakin, and so he put forth that effort. He reached out, he connected with him, and they had that little powwow. They connected with the whole the little hologram imaging communication thing, whatever it was. So he made that communication, and he did so in a way so he knew not to impact Vader's emotions. But, the problem with that is you left Vader alone. So, Vader had to deal with Luke on a private level. And so, there was that connection, that bond, and even when they were by themselves, Vader was looking at Luke and he was like, hey, the Emperor has seen that you can destroy him. And together, we can rule the galaxy as father and son. And, Luke at the time was like, no, it's not possible. Flower. And if you don't know what I mean by flower, you got to look at, you really got to take your time and look up Star Wars bad lip reading. And he's like, kids are cruel. Really one of the funniest things you've ever seen when it comes to Star Wars is bad lip reading. Absolutely hysterical. So, yes, so there's a couple of examples just within the Star Wars universe about, a quick change in life and the adjustment that has to be made. Why is that important for you and for me? Because we are going to have changes in life. Things are not always going to stay the same, and we have to accept that. And there's a variety of emotional and mental reactions that we will have when life quickly changes. So we can look at it objectively and just learn to adjust, but also giving ourselves the freedom to be able to communicate with those that we can trust, that we can confide in, somebody that is going to be loving, but also somebody that will keep things confidential. And I say confidential because of the fact that not everybody, unfortunately, can be trusted. And if you're dealing with a matter that's kind of sensitive, that you really don't want the entire planet to know, be very picky about who you share your intimate moments with. When I say intimate, don't get all bent out of shape like, what do you mean intimate, Lucas? In other words, the private moments. Stuff that is really not anybody else's business. Especially if it's, deep cutting. Oftentimes, like the tears we cry privately, we have to keep dry publicly. So not everybody sees the emotional scars. The physical scars, maybe from an accident, from a fight, whatever. Maybe you cut yourself while, cutting some onions. That's physical. People can see those. But the emotional scars, people cannot see. And it's not really important to basically broadcast what you're dealing with emotionally so everybody knows. Instead, you want to actively just adjust and pick your sources wisely. In other words, if you know that your friend over here, that you have known for years and you love very much, you can trust them. Make sure that you know that you confide. Hey, this what I'm about to discuss with you is really kind of private, and I don't want anybody knowing. And I'm telling you this in confidence, and I'm asking that you please don't tell anyone. The truth is, when stuff gets out, it can damage that friendship. Think about, again, going back into the Star Wars universe with Anakin and Panda Bear, when they were keeping it quiet, but she got pregnant. It was pretty obvious, she was busy doing some stuff, but nobody really knew who. She kind of kept that quiet. Well, Obi-Wan was not stupid. He knew how much time they spent together. In Revenge of the Sith, he looked at it, he said, "Anakin's the father, isn't he?" And she didn't even respond. The look was all over her face. And all he could say was, "I'm so sorry." But they had to keep that quiet. They put forth a lot of effort to keep that quiet. So in moments where stuff just needs to be kept quiet for whatever reason, we have our reasons, we have our lives, we have decisions we have to make. If you've got to keep it quiet, then be mindful of who you communicate with. Some people have mouths. And when I say that, I mean some people, they have a mouth they can't control, and they're just going to basically get on top of a mountain, find the exact same megaphone that Bart Simpson used that was, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger till he spoke through it and broke all these windows. You don't want anybody screaming your business from the top of the mountain, because we have struggles. And if we're dealing with something that's relatively private, sensitive, and very, very emotional, the last thing that honestly we really need is for everybody else to know. Because that can make recovery from that big life change or whatever you're going through, it can make it just that much more difficult. The goal is, my friends, is for you to successfully get through the struggles. Again, looking back into the Star Wars universe, look at Luke Skywalker as a stellar example. Because he had to learn the truth. He learned who his dad was, which meant his aunt and uncle got wiped out, even though he wasn't completely happy with them. That thing changed quickly. Then he finds out who his dad is. Then he finds out who his sister is. Then he loses his mentor. And it's not within a very, short amount of time. It's pretty quick. It happens pretty quick. And sometimes that's what happens in life, is things change quickly. And we have to switch gears and figure out exactly where we're going to go from that point on. And that is why it's so important to make sure that who we can find and who we bring close, who is our our Jedi in training, the one we're working with at Padawan or whatever, whoever we're working with, whoever we're close to, that we'll be able to successfully get through those traumatic events, those life-changing events, and to be able to come out on top. It's not easy. Nobody ever said life was going to be easy, but life is certainly not impossible. You can absolutely get through any disturbance. I want to thank all of you very, very much for taking your time to tune into this podcast. I certainly hope that you gained something positive from it. I hope you got a little bit of a laugh. I hope that it really touched you deeply and it motivated you to keep on going and keep pursuing and keep progressing, because life is complicated enough. There's no need or reason to make it even more complicated. I want you to find the light at the end of the tunnel, because, my friends, the light is there. It is absolutely there, and you'll be so glad when you reach it. Thank you again for tuning in to the Smart Wars Podcast. May the Force be with you